Everybody hear me? I have sometimes a quiet voice, but it's a small room. So I'm Dr. Alexandria Brinkhurst-Bauer. I practice in Dartmouth right now. I've actually just recently moved here from BC, so I'm also fairly new to the province, and it's a beautiful place to be. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to open my PowerPoint, is the foundations of health. And this is what Dr. Haraya was mentioning, just that we start with the foundations of health, the least invasive treatments as possible, and then move up. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about, I'll just give a brief introduction to the foundations of health, then I'll briefly go through each one individually, and then I'll just explain how it's incorporated into a visit with a naturopathic doctor, just so you can kind of get a feel for what it would be like to have an initial visit and see a naturopathic doctor. So the foundations of health are stress, sleep, nutrition, hydration, and movement. So basically when all of these foundations are addressed, everything just works better in the body. So when these are addressed, any other treatments that we would suggest, so supplements, anything like that, tend to just work better because the person's in a better place initially. So the first foundation of health I'd like to talk about is chronic stress. So this is different from acute stress. Acute stress is, in the moment something happens, an event, we get stressed out, we recover, and we move on, and that's just a normal human experience. Chronic stress is more day-to-day, low-grade stress. So things like stress at work, stress at home, financial stress, things like that that are just kind of in the background all the time. And eventually they just wear on a person. So chronic stress really does affect almost all areas of health. A lot of people attribute most illnesses to stress in some form, whether that's emotional or physical stress. I'm just going to highlight three systems that we commonly see as being contributed to by chronic stress. So the first one is the digestive system. Basically, there's a direct connection between the brain and the digestive system, and you can think of it as like a two-way highway. So information from the brain goes down to the digestive system, has an effect there. Information from the digestive system travels to the brain, has an effect on our mental health and things that happen in the brain. So what can happen, commonly we see with chronic low-grade stress, we see people with a lot of digestive issues. So things like bloating, indigestion, things like that, just typically feeling unwell. There may be issues absorbing nutrients, things like that. The reproductive system, that's another major system that can be affected by chronic stress. So we see a lot of people with issues with fertility because of chronic stress or irregular menses, things like that. Essentially, you can think of the reproductive system as something that we don't need to reproduce in order to keep ourselves alive. So if something's going on in the body, there's chronic stress, the body typically shunts resources to deal with that stress, and sometimes the reproductive system essentially just falls to the wayside. So chronic stress is a big part of managing reproductive health. And then the other thing is the immune system. So when we have chronic stress, we're releasing cortisol. Cortisol suppresses the immune system, and people tend to get more colds, flus, illnesses, things like that. So stress is something that almost all naturopathic doctors will speak about during the first visit, gauge someone's level of stress. Some people don't have much stress. Some people have a lot of stress. So if this is an area that may be contributing, it's definitely something that your naturopathic doctor will address. And sleep is another thing that we commonly ask people about, and this also can be impacted by stress. So people who have a lot of stress sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, things like that, experience some sleep issues. Other things that could be caused by poor sleep, though, would be fatigue, some brain fog in the day, some issue with memory, coordination, things like that. So mood changes, people tend to get irritable when they're sleepy. I'm sure we can all relate to how it feels to just not sleep well, because most of us have been there at some point. So sleep is really important. If it's an ongoing issue with sleep, that's definitely something most naturopathic doctors will address. And nutrition. So very famously, food is medicine, said by Hippocrates, who is father of medicine. So it definitely resonates with me. In my practice, I see a lot of people who come in with symptoms that might feel scary, things like heart palpitations or heart flutters, or extreme exhaustion, things like that. Sometimes it's as simple as a nutrient deficiency, sometimes it's something else with a nutrient deficiency, but when someone's nutrition is addressed, they're getting enough protein, they're getting enough iron, all of those things, people just feel a lot better, and then they're more able to recover from whatever they're feeling. And then hydration. This is also very simple, very effective, just making sure people are drinking enough water in the day. Really common things that can be caused by dehydration would be headaches, fatigue, even immune function, because our immune system travels through the circulatory system, so we want to be hydrated so our circulation is good, all of that stuff. Digestion is really impacted by hydration, and muscle health, things like that. And then the last foundation of health I'd like to talk about is movement. So, gauging how much activity someone's doing in a day or in a week. And this can sometimes be the first line treatment for some mood conditions. So there's a lot of research to show just getting outside in nature and going for a walk can be hugely impactful for mental health. So movement in whichever way works for the patient sitting in front of us. And it's movement, stretching, strengthening, those kinds of things, cardiovascular exercise, they just help keep someone feeling well for longer. So this is also a really big part of prevention that we utilize. And it just supports quality of life. Like if people are able to move freely, complete daily tasks on their own, things like that, it's just really important for aging as well. Oh, and that is my last slide. I had one more, it might have got cut off, but essentially this is what you'll most likely be experiencing in the first visit with a naturopathic doctor. We typically go through the main concern that someone's coming in with, whether there's something specific or just prevention. We'll go through in detail whatever, based on the patient's goals are, we'll go through in detail. And then almost always naturopathic doctors will go through these foundations of health just to make sure that they're addressed and supported so that everything else we work on is just a little bit easier from there. And that's about it. Actually, we can save questions till the end.